Welcome to another episode of the Voice of Influence podcast. I am your host, Fong Chua, and again is the happiest person on earth, my co-host, Miss Stacy McPherson. Now, again, on this show, our aim is to break down the barriers of public speaking, allowing you to succeed and become the voice of influence. Hey, Stacy, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Fong. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely amazing, and I'm so excited about this next topic that we're talking about because it's something that I find very, very fun and very, very interesting. But I'll let you lead the charge here and tell us what we're in store for.
Okay, let me get you excited for what we're going to do today. Really quickly, let's review what we did on the last one. So we talked a lot about tonality, and different kinds of things that we use to make our speech more impactful with our voice. So we covered that, and we also talked about preparation, like how to have the best preparation so that you can deliver the best speech. And today we're going to talk about body language, and we're going to talk about, I think this is what Fong is excited about. We're going to talk about what's in it for me. Is that right, Fong?
That's right.
So
So
go
when
ahead.
it comes to body language, I don't know how many of the audience members knows, but I'm sure you know. So does anybody know how much percentage of a speech is body language? It's
Mm.
actually a lot higher than people think. Most people think, oh, the content. I mean, no, not necessarily. Or the vocal variety. Oh, not necessarily. Body language actually takes up about 55% of the impact of a speech. So technically, you can go up there and just move your arms around, use your facial expressions, and you will get more messages out there than actually reading your speech monotone.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome.
Because I think it was something like 55% is body language, 37 some percent is vocal variety, and then the last remainder single digit percentage is the content,
Wow.
which is pretty interesting. So, how do you deal with body language and gestures and facial expressions?
Yes. Yes, because you want them to enhance what you're saying and not detract. And you want them to match what you're saying. Some people get really out there with their body language, their tone and so forth, but then it detracts, right? So you want it to match your speech, and you want all of your hand gestures, if possible, to be able to impact the speech positively. Some people get in these really repetitive ones and they're like, yes, you're using body language. Good job. And it's just over and over. Some people put their hands in their pockets. No, 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 no. Yeah, or clasp your hands in front of your body, which is also a no-no. You wanna learn these things that enhance and make your speech so much better. And you don't even really want your audience to be thinking about your body language. You want them to be thinking about your message, but then your body language just drives it home, makes it make more sense. So that's kind of a little background on it.
I had a client who's very, very tall, and his arms are usually tucked in. So when he moves, he does this. He always his body gestures is all like this, and I'm like, that looks like T-Rex. He's always doing this whole thing. I'm like, doesn't look that great. So then it's not noticeable to them until they see it for themselves. So that's where recording yourself is very, very important because now you get to see yourself actually doing the stuff that you may or may not know that you're doing. Plus, having people around you and giving you that feedback because, hey, did you notice that you have like T-Rex arms when you talk? It's kind of weird.
Yes, yes. They have to watch it for themselves and see it.
Now, something that helps with body language, which is what we alluded to before in other episodes, is improv again. I know you're somebody who uses improv to enhance body language skills. What are some of the things that you do, or some of the games that you introduce that helps with body language?
Okay, so I'll tell you one that I've introduced with my groups. So one, it's called giving a gift. And so you want to mime the gift. And so if you think about how miming brings out so much of your body language, right? If you were to give the gift, and at first you don't say what the gift is, and you show them like, I got you a gift, and this is going to be perfect for you. And then you reach over and you hand them the gift. And on Zoom, yes, you can use your whole screen, right? And I got closer to the camera and further away. And so that makes you use your whole screen. Obviously, it's so much better on a stage because you can use your whole body. It's so much better. But you can impact your speech positively and your impact your audience positively when you use kind of these bigger gestures and you fill the screen. And if you were to just say to somebody, okay, use your whole screen right now, it would be a little bit challenging. But if I play a game with you and then I kind of mime things and show you, okay, I've got this big, okay, happy birthday, I'm gonna cut here by, see how much we're using the screen and how I didn't have to tell you, like try to make it closer and further away, try to make it bigger or smaller. I didn't have to say that. All I had to do was say, let's play this game. So that's what I love about improv.
And it comes in naturally. People naturally go, okay, I need to grab it now. I didn't even say you have to go and go to the camera lens to do it. They just do it, right? Instead of going like this. So it's kind of interesting how people's minds work when they're thrown into an impromptu situation and have to act on the fly, and the body just acts the way you would act naturally. So that's why sometimes when we're crafting our speeches, and they go, okay, we're gonna walk into a house. I have people who are memorizing exactly this is the house I'm doing versus I'm gonna walk into a house and then like you have more flow if you just do something like that. It doesn't have to be so rigid. And so many people memorize certain movements to the speeches that you can tell once they say this word, they're gonna do this movement, this word, this movement. It doesn't have to be that way. If you practice it like you would play improv, all of a sudden, yeah, you just walk into a house and you go in forward. It feels more natural, it flows better, and it's more authentic. People would feel differently and not as rigid as something that's memorized as in your speech. Now, when it comes to gestures and expressions, something I've also found is for you, you're a very happy person. Everybody recognizes you for your smile. However, if you're telling a sad story, do you still smile?
No. And actually, I had to learn how to not do that.
Because lots of people say you always should smile when you're on stage. Always smile. But I'm like, wait a minute. Sometimes it's not congruent with what you're talking about. So take it from the person who's the happiest person in the world, who smiles all the time. How do you work on that aspect where when you're talking about a sad story, you should not smile?
What I do is I go into the emotion of the person. If it wasn't me, I go into the character and I think about them and what would they be experiencing if it was a very challenging or difficult thing for them. For example, there was a friend of mine who I was talking to, and he was separated from his parents at a young age, and he wasn't able to find them until till just 2 years ago, and he's an adult. And so he was telling me about this, and I went into the like thinking about his parents and what I would feel like, because I'm a parent, of having my children not be with me and not know where they are and not be able to recover them. Like that just it, I could feel their pain. I could feel even like the goosebumps on my arms, the 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 way your body would respond when you have those thoughts of sadness. And so just really thinking about it, empathizing with the person, empathizing with the experience, and then telling it with those thoughts, with those emotions in your heart while you're sharing it. And it can be, you need to let the audience feel it, because it's impactful. Positive emotions and negative emotions are impactful in a speech. They can both bring someone in. Have you ever heard someone say, my speech was so good, they cried? Like, in general, we don't want to make people cry, our friends and family, but it can drive a point home, right? When you're doing a strong emotional feeling, it can be more impactful.
So when you're talking about a story that's somebody else's, and you're sharing that story, your facial expressions match the sadness of that story, totally understandable because you don't want to make light of a scenario that's not yours. You're not trying to be disrespectful, and therefore your facial expression needs to match. What if it's your own sad story and you want to try and portray the fact that you're strong, you've gone through that emotional challenge and all kind of stuff? Should you still be smiley and go lucky talking about that sad story if it's your own
Uh,
personal story?
that's a good point, because in life, I'm very good at making light of traumatic things in my past. I'm very good at finding the humor. I'm very good at laughing at embarrassing things, like in life, right? But in a speech, you want to bring them, think about a story, think about a movie, and how if you are trying to help the people watching the movie see the character's growth, the hero's journey, so to speak. When a hero at the beginning has a problem, they're struggling with it, and then they grow over time, and then at the end, they are the hero. They've developed the skills and the ability to do the thing, to solve the problem. You want this whole arc, right? This is what makes a good story. So if I'm telling a story as if I'm the hero at the end, that's kind of boring. Like, who cares if you're amazing and talented and you solved it all? Like, they don't care unless they know that you struggled and you had difficulties and there were parts of it where you didn't know what to do, and maybe days where you went to bed with tears in your eyes. They want to know that because it makes you relatable to them. So that's where you're coming from, isn't it, Fong? Where you don't tell that whole story as if you're the strong hero at the end.
You give
Do you
away
have
the
an experience
punchline.
like this? Do you have an experience like this to share?
Well, with regards to I rarely share sad stories in my talks. However, I do share stories where I'm scared or something surprising is happening, and I do express, I was like, yeah, I was walking down the road every single day going to get my mail, and it felt like I'm being watched. And man, that's scary. I don't like that. And then so that story, I use the fear and use the anxiety, just so that I could get that story across and get people to be more relatable with it. Because when people are scared, they're not gonna be, yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared all the time, right? It
Yes,
doesn't work that way. So
yes.
it's not relatable.
I
Um,
love how you lowered your voice. Wasn't that great, audience? Didn't you love that? That was perfect.
Something else I would like to touch on before we move on to the next topic is posture, and that has to do with body language and how you portray yourself in like on stage. But it doesn't just start when you're on stage. It starts when you're at the venue. It starts when you walk up the stage. It starts when you walk into the conference. Same with on a virtual conference. The way you sit, the way you show yourself in front of the camera, that starts the moment you log in and turn your camera on. What are some things that you've seen people do that does not jive well when it comes to posture on stage, prior to going on stage, or even on virtual?
Oh my gosh. Okay. You should tackle this one first, Fong. You do it first and then I'll follow on.
I've seen people where they call their name, they start standing up, and you can see them slouch, and they're
Slouch.
like slouching all the way up to the stage, slouch all the way up to the podium, and then all of a sudden, hey everybody, welcome. My name is Fong. And I'm like, that just doesn't work right. And then right when their speech ends, they slouch again, and they're like, walking behind the stage. And I'm like, well, if it didn't turn out the way you wanted, and I could see the disappointment in your face and in your posture walking off the stage, that's not good either. Don't let us see that until you don't do that until you pass the curtains and nobody can see you. Just like Disney. Like Disney has a on stage, off stage line so that their performances, the parades, don't stop performing until everybody is past that line because they know that the view of sight is completely stopped and nobody can see anything from outside. But they don't stop performing, even though if they thought nobody can see. So that's what my experience is, and seeing people not treating that seriously.
Wow, that's really, really good. Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the, I would say if you were to pick one thing with posture, or I mean with body language, it would be posture. And you said it's not just when you're on the stage, it's the entire time. And I would like to expand it like to your whole life, like don't just don't just be that person on stage and when you're speaking, but actually be that person in real life. And one of the things that we've done in the Voice of Influence is talk about the actual weight of your head, and that I have a bunch of statistics and graphs that show the weight of your head. And if you lean it forward, then your body, because of the way levers work, it makes your head actually heavier, for your body and your neck to hold it up. And so being able to support it in a way that keeps your head um, in alignment, it makes it so that your head isn't as heavy and you don't have to support it as much. And we talked about how much time we spend looking at our phones and having our phones be right here. And so then we're leaning over and it's really bad for our neck and head. So posture is so important. It's so important. It conveys so much. So back to what you said earlier, Fong, about how much of our speech is our body language and our what are not our words, everything except for our words, right? Like all of the rest of it, how much impact that it has and how much it's telling the audience. So in this case, posture is telling the audience so much because we tend to stand more straight and when we're more confident and when we have a message and when we believe in ourselves. And so we're saying a lot by our posture.
I mean, like in the virtual sense, our posture is this. Are we framed right? Are we positioned? Are we centered? Can you imagine if we started this podcast like this? So yeah, again, we're gonna be talking about this and that. Once you start talking, they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to hear this person
I
speak
would be
anymore.
uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. So when we're on a virtual space, there's other things to be cognizant about, and that is how do you look on frame? How are you positioned? Are you using the screen correctly? What's on the background? Right? All that stuff. Is it a mess in the back? Is it blurry? Is things disappearing? All that stuff has to do with the presentation that you put in front of people. So very, very important stuff.
Yes, yes, so good, so good.
So moving on. What's in
Moving
it for me?
What's in it for me? Would you like me to talk about it?
You can start.
Okay, I would love to ask the audience, what do you care about? Like here you are sitting here watching and listening to the Voice of Influence podcast. What do you care about? Put it in the comments. Like we want to know what is important to you. What do you want to get better at? What do you want to like have more of an impact in? What are the areas? Like what do you care about? So we'll start that by asking our audience to share with us. And then we should know somewhat what you want, what you're interested in. And so we've done our best, but we always want to improve. Isn't that right, Fong?
That's true because we always have to be cognizant of what's in it for the people that we're presenting this to. If can't understand or if we can't envision what they want and what they need, then everything that we're doing is for naught. Because if all this stuff is not valuable or if it has no benefit to the listener, then why are we actually doing this? Right? So when we're doing presentations, when we're doing speeches, what is in it for the audience? Why should they listen to you and why should they care about what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you do this, Fong?
For me, it's one of those things where, first of all, you have to understand who your audience is. Like, depending on what conferences you're talking to or what themes you're talking at, you have to understand, okay, this is the type of audience that's going to be there. How do I make my talk relatable to that audience? If it's an audience of all kids, which I've done before, then I had all my references on cartoons and sports and stuff that they would actually know references to. But if I start referencing like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, then they're like, who are those people? Like they're not old enough to have understood. They know what Apple is, but they may or may not know who actually invented Apple. So it's the reference points and the examples that you give that makes it relatable to your audience. And then have call to actions, ask questions. And as you're doing your presentation, asking those questions and getting a feel of what the audience is responding to, putting their hands up, then you could go, okay, I can tweak my talk a little bit more towards this, or I can move towards this story more because more people have shown response to that question. I could talk about that story a little bit more. So that's some of the things I do when I'm talking to a group of people is to ask those questions to see which stories and how I could relate to them better.
I love it when I can see my audience. So on the bigger stages, you have the spotlight in your eyes and you can't see them, their facial expressions and stuff. So I like to test out my speeches on smaller audiences first because I like to see their faces. I like to see, are they engaged? Do they care about this? Are they interested in this? Do they maintain eye contact with me? Like if they are looking in my eyes, that gives me so much more impact on them than if they're just kind of wandering around. And yes, I advise taking notes, especially if it's a highly educational type of topic. So people will be taking notes. But if you can say things in a way that get them to look up from their notes to like, oh, that you said that, like eye contact is really powerful to be able to see, are they engaged, do they care about what I'm saying? So that's one area, but there's so much we could talk about, right, Fong? So many areas.
For sure. Like, for instance, if you're on stage and you see people, like you mentioned already, you may or may not see everybody because there's so many people out there and it's usually dark. So you focus on the people who you can see, and you only focus on the people who are engaging, who are paying attention. Because if you start seeing the people who are like, okay, here's another speaker, then you're gonna get detracted from what you're trying to talk about because you know they're not interested. So forget about that person. Focus on the people who are actually paying attention. And
Mhm.
if you know their names, it's even better.
Oh
If
yeah, so
you're
good.
able to call out names of
Oh
people in the audience, right away the audience starts feeling, hey, wait a minute, we're involved in this conversation because a person in our group, the audience, has just been called out. And therefore, ooh, I'm a little bit more interested. So if you're able to bring people up as as examples or as a demonstration or something, it it takes that impact so much farther than you just talking about everything
yes,
without the examples.
exactly. Oh my gosh, interact. One speaker, I think you were there for this one, asked for a lady's shoe and you brought the shoe up on the audio. You know, it was Steve McKinney or Frank
It's
McKinney.
right. Yep.
Yeah, anyway, it was so good. And so like bringing the audience, an object up from the audience onto the stage, depending on how much time you have, if you have more like an hour or something, you can bring people up, have them interact with you, answer questions and so forth. But if you're limited to a 5 minute, 10 minute, it's more challenging to bring people up and have them interact. But if you bring them up and then don't give them the mic, so to speak, you just have them do something that's really powerful. So it's so good. Like what you said is so exactly right on. It just brings the audience in. They're so much more engaged. They're like, oh, that could happen to me. They could ask me to come up on stage, you know?
Yeah. So a lot of stuff that we're talking right now is things that we could do while we're actually doing the presentation, while we're actually doing the speech. You can always write in certain cues in your presentation, go, hey, ask a question here, or bring an audience member up here, or call out a name here, so that you could have that constant engagement with your audience members and also getting a feel for what they're looking for. But all the stuff we're talking about, you can actually start before your presentation. So for instance, if you know your organizer, you can ask the organizer, hey, what's my audience going to be looking for? What do they want? If you're hosting your own thing, you could send out a questionnaire out there and ask them, what are you looking for? What would you like to get out of it? What would you be surprised about? And if you get all that, guess what? You can formulate your presentation, your courses and all that kind of stuff with that in mind. And then they go, wow, this is exactly what I want.
So perfect. That's so good. That's awesome. And another thing along with what's in it for you, for them, is you want to make sure that you know the climate. So for example, if you were to be speaking to a specific group of people that you probably know have leanings or tendencies toward a certain political way, you would be very careful not to make jokes, not to reference politicians in a certain way. Like you, if you're in a different country, like if you're in Dubai versus if you're in Europe versus if you're in Africa, like you want to be able to say things that are attractive and interesting to them, but not offensive and not diminishing their priorities and the things that they care about. You have to be especially careful with humor when you're in a diverse group or when you're in a group that you're isn't the same as you. You know, you need to be really do your research and understand what things are offensive, what things. I've been in groups where people have said things like, I could give an example, and that was when I was in Thailand. Someone got up and made a kind of a glib cliche reference to their king, and that is not okay, not okay. You don't do that. You
Wow.
can, yeah, so things like that.
Yeah, so for people who think that, well, what's wrong with making this joke or commenting on this, you'll be surprised. In fact, I think Stacy, you and I both know somebody else who was in prison for 2 years because of them showing photos of them with certain people who were then associated with certain politicians. It's not even the person with that politician, it's this person with this person who is associated with this politician. And that got that person imprisoned for over 2 years before they came out. So it is a big, big thing to think about when you're going out there and speaking internationally, especially because you have to get a grasp as to what's in it for them and what's important and what's a no-no subject when you're speaking to that group, right? So you need to understand what they're looking for first and foremost.
Yes. So here's a question for you, Fong. How do you keep your audience engaged if you're giving material that they might not find as interesting? So there's a part of your speech where you need to deliver this. Say you're an MC and you need to tell them the rules of the venue or how to get to different places. You can tell people are going to tune out. How do you deal with it when the content isn't super like attention grabbing?
I think the first thing I could think of is, okay, first of all, I'm going to try and give it as much excitement and as much energy as I can for something that has zero energy whatsoever. Like, your fire exit is over here. Your fire exit is going to be over there. If you have any problems, run there now. Right? So
Awesome.
you kind of give it a little bit more excitement to it and make fun of the situation. I think it was one of the airlines that I was with that instead of the normal, okay, you have to pull your mask down and all that kind of stuff, they did the entire presentation in a song. They sang the entire instructions. I'm like, okay, now I'm interested. I would like to hear you sing it again. In fact, do it in French now so that I could hear it a second time. So something like that. But if it was my content and I find that, oh, they're kind of getting a little bit energyless and all that kind of stuff, that's when I might go, okay, everybody, let's do a quick little exercise or a quick little Q&A or popcorn kind of thing, asking people for feedback, get the energy back up, and then go back into the content I was talking about. And then during that time, try and think about, okay, how do I deliver this content a little bit differently so that it's more interesting?
Awesome. I love your fire exit story. That's so good. Oh, that's awesome.
So
Yeah.
for yourself, like when you are faced with a group of audience members that are kind of disengaged, how do you
Mhm.
get them back?
So my mentor actually talked about how you can do this hand gesture that he had a name for, where you do a stop motion with your hands and a blah. And he says what this does is it resets, it recalibrates the audience. They're confused. They're like, why are they, and it doesn't have, it's just kind of a, and actually I'll tell you, my mentor is from Australia and his name, I really recommend him. Anything that you watch of his is fantastic. Like, he's been my mentor for years and I've gone to his live events, but as a, just because that's his own technique, I needed to reference it for, he created it and it's been effective for him. And so that's one of the things that I've done, that like people are kind of like distracted, but you are on a timeline and you have things you need to get forward, to say in your speech. So it's a very quick way to kind of grab their attention and then kind of get them back on track. One of the things that people struggle with is if they are not presenting their own content. So sometimes you are required, like you volunteer to be a speaker for someone else's content. And so you have to present it in a way that they are happy with, and you can't change it too much because then it's making it your own. And so that kind of stop reset that Vin taught me has been very effective if I'm presenting someone else's content.
When you talked about how you do this thing and then
Yeah.
whatnot, you do a reset. It reminded me of a time when I was talking to a client of mine one-on-one, and I was kind of explaining things as to, okay, you have to do this and do that, and then my hands were doing this. And I noticed that all he looked at was my hands. And he was following my hands the whole time to the point where I'm like, I wonder if I did this, if he'll notice, right? And he starts going like this. I'm like, he's following every single thing I'm doing, but he's paying attention because my hands were moving all the time. Again, back to what if it's important for them, what's in it for them is the content, and you want them to pay attention. But how do you keep their attention? Go back to body language, right? So it's all the stuff that you can do that keeps them engaged, keep them interested as to what they're looking at, what they're listening to, and the content, and that's what's in it for them because you could relate to them as well. So everything comes kind of full circle. Anything else that you want to share about about body language, gestures, posture, and what's in it for me?
I think we covered it. That was really great. I really liked the times where we laughed. I don't know if you noticed, but I cry when I laugh. So it was so fun. Today was delightful. It was really enjoyable. Thanks, Fong.
Awesome. Well, it's a lot of fun being able to do this with you, and I can't wait for our next few episodes here. So, she's Stacy. My name is Fong, and until next time, when you speak with confidence, you have the voice of influence. We'll see you later.